G'day, everybody, and most of all, hello, Jane, my dear friend, my mentor, and my inspiration. In planning for today, I thought about writing some questions, and I know there's going to be some Q&A afterwards, but I just want to chat to you as a friend and as that person that you've been in my life. And to summarize what you mean to me, what you represent is that conservation is not just a hobby, it's not a pastime, it's not even a career, it's a lifelong commitment. And I think what that represents, not only to me, but so many people around the world, is such an amazing thing at such a critical time in history. We turn on the news, we see the world is heating up, it's flooding, it's natural disasters. We see continued exploitation of natural resources and precious wildlife around the world, increasing poverty, just I don't think we can look at protecting the natural world as a pastime, or it has to be all in commitment. And if you could just explain to us what motivated you, how you got started, and how you managed to persevere through everything for so long. Thank you.
Thanks, Damien. Well, I have to say that you're an inspiration for me too. So let's get that straight at the beginning. It's Mutual Admiration Society, which is good for friendship, I think. So anyway, I suppose most people listening know that I amazingly got to study chimpanzees in Tanzania when I was 26. Having dreamed of going to Africa and living with wild animals and writing books about them ever since I was 10, and had the amazing support of my mother. So that being said, the best days of my life were when I was out there in the rainforest with the chimpanzees, learning about these amazing beings so like us, realizing too that the main difference was the explosive development of our intellect. Because although animals, all of them, are way, way more intelligent than scientists were prepared to believe at one time, nevertheless, you know, we can make rockets that go up to Mars and little robots that take photos up there. And that's sort of out of any kind of animal intellect. But being intellectual has not made us intelligent, because intelligent creatures don't destroy their only home. And that's what we are doing. The reason I left Gombe in 1986 was at a big conference, and it was just for the first time bringing people studying chimpanzees. By then there were 6 other study sites. We brought them together in Chicago, basically to discuss, did chimp behavior differ from one environment to the next, which could be put down perhaps partly to environmental pressure, but also to culture. Was there such a thing as chimp culture, which we now know there is? And we also had a session on conservation, and it was just a shock. I mean, I knew that there was deforestation, but to see the extent of it in all the chimp countries and the decrease in numbers of chimpanzees across their range was a real shock. And so I went to that 4-day conference. You know, I had by then got my PhD. Amazingly, I never got a BA. And I went as a scientist. I was planning to stay at Gombe. I mean, it was just the most idyllic life you could possibly imagine, out in the rainforest, feeling the connection of all the species that make up that ecosystem, learning more and more about the chimpanzees. But I left that conference as an activist, I suppose you'd call it. It was just a total change. I mean, I didn't make a decision. It was just something that changed inside of me. I've got to try and do something to help. I didn't know what to do, but started off finding out more about problems in Africa for the chimpanzees and learning a lot about that, but learning also about the problems faced by so many of the African people. And one thing led to another, and the Jane Goodall Institute was formed, and there's 27 of them around the world now. And it changed from just conservation of chimps, the conservation of forests and the animals in the forest, and helping the people make ways of living without destroying the environment. And how do I keep going? Because, well, the older you get, I mean, people say, Jane, aren't you slowing down? I mean, I'll be 90 next year, Damien. 90, imagine. But I have to speed up because I don't know how many years I've got left, but obviously less than 10 years ago. So I have to speed up. And why do I want to do this? Because I'm passionate. I'm obstinate. I won't give up. We're fighting against big corporate interests and greed and goodness knows what. And so I shall just continue fighting because I care. I care about the animals. I care about the environment, and I care about our children.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. It was animals that got me into conservation and seeing the suffering of what these animals go through. And I think the language of animals is too complex for us to comprehend, but the language of suffering is universal. And it was getting involved with animals and just wanting to protect them, wanting to do something for them that led me and the organization into, I suppose, if I was going to sit back in some decades to come and look back on my life, I'd like to say I helped play a part in protecting as much of the natural world as possible because of the animals that live in these ecosystems. And the issues we face on this planet, there's lots of solutions, but we got a solution that's just spent 5 billion years refining itself, and it's called nature. And I think if more people started to understand that we can't just keep taking. We've been given one beautiful backyard called nature, and if we don't look after it, we're going to be the endangered species. The planet will be just fine. The planet will bounce back. It always has. We have entered the 6th mass great extinction on this planet, and for the first time in history, it's a human-created phenomenon. What advice could you give to people out there to inspire them to change, to start recognizing the urgency of the situation that we're in?
Well, I think an awful lot of it, one of the big problems is dissociation from nature with our, with all our electronics today. People spend more time virtually than they do actually out in nature. This is particularly damaging for children because, it's been proved now that, especially for small children, being in nature is enabling them to have a good psychological development. So how do we get people to act? We need them, first of all, to understand that we're part of the natural world. We're not separate from it. And a lot of people, nature's over there, and I'm in the city, and that's over here, and never the twain shall meet. A few little flowers in the garden, that's it. But not only are we part of nature, but we depend on it, don't we? For clean air, for clean water, for food, for flipping everything. So depending on it for everything and seeing that we're destroying it before our eyes, it does make it seem pretty urgent that we need to do something about it. And Damien, I think another important thing, people are losing hope. People read the stuff and there's so much doom and gloom out there. And we do need to know about the doom and gloom. Of course we do. Yeah. But I've been fortunate going around the world meeting so many incredible people like you, doing amazing things like your program. Seeing places we destroyed and give nature a chance and she'll come back. Animals on the brink of extinction can be given another chance. And that's really important now, because if people see these good news stories, they're more likely to think, gosh, they did that, we can do it too.
What you said about people losing hope, I think one of the biggest mistakes we can all make is to think that small changes in our lives can't mean big changes in others. And I've got 3 children. I want to be able to have hope for them. I want to be able to have a planet that they can live on, a good future, a positive future. And some people may be losing hope, but if I could say something, it's just don't lose hope. Hang in there. We have the fight of our civilization in front of us. It wasn't our parents' fault, and it's not our children's responsibility. It's all of our responsibility. So if the people out there could please hold on to hope, and I love a good scrap, so I'm all in all the way to the end. And you have been one of the greatest inspirations to me in my conservation career, as short as it is, only 14 years, but getting involved with just trying to play my part in protecting nature. So thank you.
Well, this business of losing hope, people come up to me all the time, particularly young people, which is worrying, saying, you know, they've lost hope. And if you lose hope, you just become apathetic. I mean, why bother? If what you do isn't going to make a difference, why do it? You know, we can be married, tomorrow we die. So when they come to me and say that they feel like this, I say, well, look, stop thinking about the whole world. You can't change the whole world. Nobody can. Think about what you care about in your community or somewhere. Maybe people care about cruel treatment of dogs. Maybe they care about a bad zoo. Maybe they care about litter in the street, whatever it is. Just go back and try and find some people who feel like you and get together, make a plan, roll up your sleeves and do something. And if you do something and you see that you are making a difference, and so that makes you feel good. So if you feel good, you want to feel better, so you do more and you inspire more people. And then you realize, at least, Jane Goodall Institute with 27, 29 JGIs now, and our youth program in 69 countries, then you know that other people are doing what you're doing in all these places, and others too, because there's other programs like yours. So then you can start to have hope again.
You know, there's a lot of people that believe that doing some good gives us credits to continue doing bad things or destructive activities, and we've got to shift that balance. I know you've played an amazing role in reaching people around the world with your Roots and Shoots program, and I had a great meeting with the team in Africa last week, actually. And I did. And given the amount of leases that we've been able to enter into across 4 countries now, and having long-term anchorage into these communities, over 9 million acres that we're helping to protect with a staff of almost 600, we've got a really great platform to be helping to spread Roots and Shoots. Maybe for the listeners out there, can you give us a bit of insight into why you started Roots and Shoots, what it is and what it means, please?
Absolutely. It's one of my biggest, hopes for the future. It started back in 1991, but the need for it began earlier, in the late 1980s, because already high school students, university students all around the world, I was lecturing all around the world, and so many of them, even then, were losing hope. And they were either mostly just apathetic, not seeming to care, but some of them were really angry, sometimes violent, and some of them were depressed. I mean, even deep clinical depression. So I asked them, why they felt like that. And they said, well, you've compromised our future. There's nothing we can do about it. Not only have we compromised the future of our young people, we've been stealing it probably since the Industrial Revolution, but not too late to do something. And so it all began in 1991 in February. I remember it so well. 12 high school students came to my house in Dar es Salaam. And I'd been going around, it was Gombe's 30th anniversary, and I'd been going around the schools giving talks. So these 12 high school students came from 8 schools, and they had all their problems. They wanted me to solve them. They were worried about street children with no homes. They were worried about the illegal dynamite fishing, destroying the coral reefs. They were worried about all sorts of things. And I said, well, yes, I love Tanzania, but you're Tanzanian. And so get your friends who feel like that, and we'll have a meeting and see what can be done. So I think it was about 30 students. And we decided, first of all, that we would have groups in schools. And the main message would be every individual matters. Every individual has some role to play, even if they don't know what it is yet. And every individual makes a difference every day. And you can choose what sort of difference you make. And the second thing we decided, because of all this interrelationship in nature, that every group would choose, they would choose, so it's ground up, not top down. They would choose 3 projects, one to help people, one to help animals, one to help the environment. And so it gradually grew, just like our program to help people grew, and started spreading around the world. And now, as I say, it's in 69 countries. It has members in preschool, not many, but lots in kindergarten, lots in university where it's really strong, very strong in high school, very strong in middle school. I mean, it's because kids get to choose. They're not told what to do. I mean, of course, the teeny ones have to have a bit of help, but otherwise, you know, they just get some guidance and ideas. And Damien, I would say every other day I get a letter from somebody saying, I cannot tell you how happy I am that I joined Roots and Shoots because it has changed my life. Hundreds of them, even if they're in business or whatever, they're working to make a lighter imprint on the world each day.
No, thank you, Jane. What a lot of our listeners today, the people that have tuned in, may not know that you're on the road for up to 300 days a year, traveling around the world, inspiring people, speaking to audiences, and actually just being able to, I won't lie, just being able to corner you here today for this 1 hour chat is like catching lightning in a bottle. Can you tell us what's next for you? Where are you off to? Who are you speaking to? What does the rest of the year look like for you, Jane?
I don't want to think of the whole year, but already since Christmas, I've been to Abu Dhabi, Dubai, been to Qatar. I've been to Tanzania, to 4 different cities. I've been to Holland and Germany and Hungary. I've been to 5 cities in Canada. I've been to Phoenix, and I'm just off to Japan and South Korea. And then after that is Tanzania. Oh, I've been to Tanzania already in February, going back to Tanzania because my family's there and Gombe there, you know.
Yeah.
And then after that, Damien, I just honestly didn't want to think beyond that. Enough.
Yeah. I suppose when it's, you know, the most elusive thing in life is purpose. And you obviously have a purpose that is a passion and something that drives you. And it's very often can be hard to separate who we are from what we do when you're so immersed in something and so passionate about it and you see what it means. What do you do to relax or just to stay energized? Because a lot of people, not only in our conservation movement, but in philanthropy around the world, it does feel like an uphill battle. It does feel like sometimes we're speaking to a brick wall. I like to think the truth is accumulative, and the more that we keep getting the message out there, the deeper it will sink in. But what advice can you give to me and to people out there when it does feel like we're, you know, the cards are stacked against us?
Well, in a way, the cards are stacked against us as long as we have the power of big business, you know, the multi-corporations and so on. But the good news is, even within business, things are changing and people's attitudes are changing. Far more people are aware of the problems than they were, say, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That's one positive thing. And I think, well, here's a story which I think gives one idea of why I can be hopeful. I was talking to a group of CEOs, actually in Singapore, And one of them afterwards came up to me and he said, Jane, I have been really struggling to get ethics into my corporation. It was an international one. And he said, I've been trying to get fair wages for the people in the country where we source our products. I've been trying to help their communities. I've been trying to be fair along the supply chain. I've been trying to get ethical standards in all our offices around the world and in the way we treat our customers. And he said there were 3 reasons. One, I saw the writing on the wall. I saw we were using up natural resources too fast in some places for nature to replenish them. Secondly, consumer pressure. People are beginning to ask questions about what they buy. Where did it come from? Could I have bought it locally and saved air miles? Did it harm the environment when it was made? Was it cruel to animals like the factory farms? Is it cheap because of unfair wages? But he said, what really tipped the balance for me was my little girl of 8. And she came home from school one day and she said, Daddy, they tell me that what you're doing is hurting the planet. That's not true, is it, Daddy? Because it's my planet. That reached the heart. And that's what we have to do. It's no good shouting at people and pointing fingers, telling them that they're bad, that they've got to change, and don't they realize, because they won't want to listen. And they'll be trying to refute you with everything you say if you argue with them. The heart stories, that to me is the way to change people. And even if you seem not to have made any impact, you've still put a little seed in that heart.
I can't help thinking that a lot of people, particularly in powerful positions, whether that be through wealth, capital, or in CEO positions, are turning a blind eye to how much change they can actually make and how much influence they do have. We're a species that I think can respond really well when we're pushed far enough into a corner. I don't think we realize how close that corner is. And if we're going to be able to make the changes that we need to make in time, not that I'm going to keep, going to stop trying. What changes and what influences do you think the world leaders and the CEOs around the world, like the one you just spoke about, can have?
I have to go back again to roots and shoots, because roots and shoots, the kids are changing their parents. They get it. The young people, they see this is their future, and they see it being eaten away and chopped down and in other ways destroyed, and they're very passionate, but they're still young. They still have enthusiasm. Our roots and shoots groups, I would say almost everywhere, whatever their situation, they have hope that together they can get out of it. And that's very contagious. And I find that, I think you asked me back then where I got the energy to carry on. And a lot of it comes from these inspiring young people. And well, we all believe differently, but I just happen to believe there's some great spiritual power, and I can draw energy from it. I get energy from the audience as I speak to, because they're so enthusiastic. And yes, it's a grim picture out there. So we just have to hang on to the positive. We have to hang on to, we've got to make this for our children. We can't give up. You've got 3 children.
Yeah.
I've got grandchildren, probably soon great-grandchildren. I've got 3, 1 son. But, people are deciding not to have children. But if we do have children, then it's up to us to help them see that if we all get together and do our bit, we can slow down climate change and loss of biodiversity.
Hopefully leave this place in a better way than we found it. Jane, thank you so much. I know we've got a bunch of questions that have been flooding in. I'm going to hand it over to Gwen, and we can start ticking off some of these questions. And thank you very much to our audience, our listeners, for sending these questions in.
But before we start the questions, I have to say, Damien, since I've met you, the difference that you've made, what you've done with your organization since I first met you, it's huge. And your whole vision in getting women involved was brilliant. We do the same in our program around chimp areas. You know, we involve women in improving things. We try and give scholarships to girls so they can get a chance of secondary education and things like that. So I just want to thank you for what you've done. And what you do must give a lot of inspiration to people, just like what I do gives inspiration to people. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Jane. Yeah, it was, let's just call it, it was a long evolution from where I started in my military background. And when I entered conservation, I fell into cadence with the law enforcement side of conservation. It's all I knew. And it took me 8 years to realize that conservation it's not just a conservation issue, it's a social issue. And when we have social impact, we can have a conservation outcome. And in trying to change our organization 6 years ago to have the greatest social impact, it was an overwhelming body of evidence that told us empowering women in Africa is the greatest force for positive change. And we looked at conservation as an industry where women in an operational role is outnumbered by as much as 100 to 1. And then we just tried to figure out, okay, if the largest line items in our budgets are salaries for rangers and staff, how do we start allocating that money into the hands of women at household level, into these rural communities that surround the areas that we're working in? And, you know, the model just took off. We drastically reduced corruption, working in some of the most corrupt countries in Africa. And women seem to naturally de-escalate tension in a potentially conflicting situation. That alone cut our operational costs by 2/3. We started investing the other 2/3 back into healthcare, education, clean water, infrastructure development. And we found this holistic model. We went from being inside a reserve looking out and figuring out how we're going to protect it, to being in the community, shoulder to shoulder with the local and indigenous communities of Africa on a continent that's going to have 2 billion people on it by 2040. If we didn't figure out a way to try and get the community to see the benefits of conservation, the long-term benefits, then we're just going to end up with isolated pockets of success. So thank you very much for acknowledging that. Coming from you, it means more than anyone in the world. So thank you, Jane.
It's fascinating because we're both doing that. You know, we both hit on what we call in community-led conservation, giving it into their hands, because it's their, you know, you can't draw a line between here's something for animals and here's something for people. It doesn't work that way. Half the animals aren't in protected areas, but we want to protect them. So the people are protecting them. Yeah,
I think the trying to reposition social impact and rural development so that it leads to a conservation outcome is a way that we can leverage all these different silos of support that are coming into Africa and into rural communities around the world and tie them all together. So that they are linked and communities are motivated. They do see the benefits of biodiversity conservation, not just in the short term, but in the long term. And that those people around the world that support these initiatives are having local impact with positive global consequences.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, Jane, I know we have some very enthusiastic people out there listening today with some questions. So shall we open the floor?
Sure.
Thank you so much, Damien and Jane. Our first question comes from Narazo Hoto, Sergeant Major of Akashinga and 2021 IUCN International Ranger of the Year. Narazo asks, Dear Dr. Goodall, you have been an amazing inspiration to me and the rest of the women in Akashinga. What message can you give to other women in conservation around the world?
I think the world is beginning to understand the tremendously powerful role that women can play. And that, you know, I would say about 20, 25, 30 years ago, when women wanted to move up into, you know, different kind of circle where the men operate, they felt they had to do so by being very, very tough, masculine and aggressive. And now it's calmed down, because we need the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang. And, you know, women just calm things down, as Damien said. Women have throughout evolution evolved to be able to just sense what's going wrong in the family and community around them and find ways of smoothing those differences out so that the whole community benefits. So the message would be to thank the women who are involved. And I know that some of you are very brave, very courageous, and you face all kinds of danger. So huge congratulations on all that you're doing.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Candor B. This question is for you, Damien. What insights can you offer about how the various newly emerging monetization of nature finance models will affect conservation going forward?
Yeah, I mean, if we talk about carbon credits and an emerging market such as biodiversity credits, I personally think that they are going to be the future of funding conservation, but there's a gap. Those markets are hard to access, and some of them not even ready for market yet. And it's going to rely on largely investment from around the world, shifting policies from governments that make it mandatory to invest in nature, and of course, philanthropy. And the question I always like to ask is, what's it going to cost to protect versus what's it going to cost if we don't protect it? And we're at such a critical time in the next decade where the change has to be made. The difference can be made or lost between now and the end of the decade, actually. And this is sort of this race at the moment. There's so many landscapes across the African continent that are at risk of being fragmented. And this is, I mean, we've mapped out a course to the end of the decade that would help us go into partnership direct with local communities to protect 30 million acres of wilderness across the continent, which would be one of the largest portfolios to be protected. But working with other organizations that are focusing on taking a social impact approach to achieve nature-based outcomes. I mean, the job that needs to be done is too big for one organization. So people out there need to look at helping to close that gap between where we are now and these emerging markets, to hold on to these landscapes so they don't become fragmented. Otherwise, as I said before, we're just going to end up with these isolated pockets of success, and that is not going to be enough to sustain us as a civilization.
Yeah, and the importance of corridors, that's really important. Corridors linking one protected area with another, big enough corridors. And remember, it's not just Africa. We're trying to do the same in Australia and India and China and America and Latin America. It's a huge job. But then that's perhaps one benefit of the number of people on the planet. There's enough people to tackle all the problems.
Yeah, it's true.
It's the only benefit I can think of, but it is one.
Thank you both. Our next question comes from Arturo G, and this question is for you, Jane. Could you explore for us the intersection between cultural survival and primate conservation for some of the most endangered tribal groups in sub-Saharan Africa?
Yeah, I can only answer it with the route that we've taken, which is to work with those endangered people to help them find ways of making a living without harming the environment, to encourage people to live in harmony with nature, which isn't always easy, but we're working on it, and to realize that the people and the animals, they both have a right to be where they are, and they need to respect each other. And that's what we're trying to do, to promote harmony between animals and people. And I mean, things like elephants, you can understand when a poor community gets really upset when elephants trample their crop and eat it all. So what do? Shoot the elephants? There's a much easier way, which is to put a wire around the crops and hang beehives off it. And elephants are terrified of bees. Well, if you have a long trunk, you know bees go for moisture, and you imagine a trunk full of bees, I think you can see why elephants are scared. And so they move away. It's just a simple thing like that. We have to think of more of those solutions to encourage harmony between people and animals.
Yeah, it definitely seems to, at least in the work that we do. So when we look at a landscape, I like to think of it as a jigsaw puzzle. The national parks are the ones that sort of seem to be nailed to the page, protected by a federal mandate. And of course, that's not always the case in every country, but it's the connective tissue across these landscapes, the pieces of land that are owned by the local communities, the traditional leaders that are at risk of being lost. And these make up more than 70% of Africa's wilderness estate, these areas outside of national parks. I think they have similar or even better biodiversity value, but from a strategic standpoint, they often surround national parks, providing a buffer. But most importantly, they fall on the peripherals of these ecosystems, which gives us the footprint with which to have the relationship with the community. And so I mentioned the communities surrounding these ecosystems are the future of conservation in Africa. And human-wildlife conflict is one of the greatest challenges we have. And of course, the more successful a conservation organization is, the more animals that there are in these areas, and having a toolbox of methods to deal with human-wildlife conflict and to mitigate that conflict and turn it into human-wildlife coexistence is critical to all of the formulas of people working in these areas.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Martha H., and this is for Damien and Jane. She asks, how do you keep hope alive when we are flooded daily with so much overwhelming bad news?
We're at a critical time in history. As I said, with 3 children and a world that's heating up and cooking and flooding, we don't have a choice. We have to make this work, and it's all in. We have to keep motivating people. We have to keep having our conversations. We have to keep getting better at them. We have to keep inspiring others to get on board, because I'm not going to accept the path that we're going down. And from the moment I wake up every morning to the last minute before I go to bed, this is what's on my mind. It's about how do we keep getting better at what we do. The wilderness we're trying to protect has had 5 billion years to evolve. Evolution is the cutting away of the bits that don't work and retaining the bits that do. As humans, we don't have 5 billion years to evolve. We've got a handful of decades at best. And I think that's what all our lives are about. It's about cutting away the bits that don't work and keep the bits that do, and growing as individuals. And I think that's the best that we can all do.
Yeah, well, I think, just to add one thing, I see humanity as at the mouth of a very, very long, dark tunnel. And right at the end of that tunnel is a little star, and that's hope. But it's no good sitting at the mouth of the tunnel and hoping the star will come. No, we have to roll up our sleeves and crawl under, climb over, work around all the obstacles like climate change, loss of biodiversity, commercial agriculture with its reliance on pesticides and herbicides, and poverty and unsustainable lifestyle, all of those problems. But the good news, every one of those problems that I mentioned or Damien mentioned, and the ones that we didn't, those groups of people working to try and solve them. The sad thing is so often they're working in silos. And if you don't see the whole picture, you may solve your problem. Yay, we shut down this coal mine. All those emissions are being prevented from going up into the greenhouse gases. Hooray. If you haven't thought of the whole picture, you haven't taken into consideration the people who've lost their jobs, who sink into poverty, who destroy the environment in order to survive. Whereas there are people now who are skilled in educating people whose industry has closed down to do other forms of work. So if you reached out to them before you tried shutting your coal mine, you wouldn't cause that problem. You'd shut down the coal mine and you'd have people being trained to find other ways of living.
And this is for you, Jane. Beth asks, what is the biggest challenge you faced in trying to raise awareness for sustainability, conservation, and preservation? And how have you overcome these? What advice might you have for those with a similar mission?
I would say one major problem is corruption. One major problem is some of the governments around the world that have become very autocratic and have lost any thought of democracy. Another major problem is funding. You can't really get on and do what you need to do if you can't raise the funds to do it, which is very irritating for me because as Damien said, I'm going around the world about 300 days a year, which is not good for the environment. I'm going on aeroplanes, which isn't good. But on the other hand, our roots and shoots groups are planting millions of trees that are, I think, absorbing far more than my CO2 emissions from my commercial flights. So those are the main problems that I see. How do I overcome them? Well, you have to take each one in its context, and these solutions are different. But the main thing is not to give up, because there's always a way. Just consult with people, find somebody who can help you forward on this difficult path, find ways of working with difficult politicians. I don't know what to do about corruption, but.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Ella G, and this is for you, Damien. She asks, what would you say is the root cause of poaching and wildlife trafficking, and how can we address these issues?
Yeah, I mean, increasing poverty and an increasing demand for natural resources, not only across Africa, but across the world. And, you know, from what I see in my experience, it's driven by two avenues. One is subsistence. People need to survive. It's hard to tell someone who doesn't know where the next meal is coming from that the long-term preservation of wildlife is critical to all of our survival. And so that's why working with communities and working on these social impact programs, creating local jobs, creating ways that people have an alternative to poaching is so critical to being able to protect such wide tracts of land. And in a way, it's almost like playing politics with the people that we have to work with. We can't please everyone with the work that we do because there's simply so many. But what we can do is try and please the majority of the people in these communities through investing money into circular economies, investing in rural development, so that the community as a whole sees the benefit of nature conservation through these programs and will help protect these areas that are far too big to protect with just a small group of rangers. The other side is organized crime, and that is driven by greed. It's driven by poachers that are going out there and syndicates that are going out there trying to hunt elephants for their tusks, trying to hunt animals for their skin, rhino for their horn, trying to traffic animals, trying to traffic chimpanzees to go into various live markets around the world. You know, we're sitting here at a time civilization's just been brought to its knees for 3 years as a direct result of the way that we treat nature, and this is animals going into live markets, and this is often organized crime where wildlife is just another currency alongside human trafficking, alongside drugs, alongside money, alongside weapons. You know, this is the danger of the work that we do. It's not uncommon for conservationists or people involved with the environmental movement to be assassinated, to be taken out, to have their families threatened. All doing this. Our conservation doesn't pay a lot of money. You know, we all doing this because we love what we do. We're passionate about it. We know it's the right thing to do. You know, but it's dangerous work because of the nature of some of these syndicates that we have to deal with.
The other thing we have to tackle is demand, because these syndicates couldn't make money if people weren't buying what they're trafficking around the world. And so that's where our roots and shoots in these different countries, like we made quite an impact in China about ivory. And I know the problem is that the ivory carvers and people just went to countries around China to do it. One advantage of an autocratic government is that you can really impose sanctions on importing endangered species if you so wish. Corruption, of course, but so working on the demand, I think, is a really, really important side of it. And that's where we're using roots and shoots.
I agree. it's a battle, a struggle that's got to be fought on multiple fronts, on the ground, at policy level, transnational crime. I was fortunate enough, Jane, to just spend about 4 days with Peter and Corey Knights. And, you know, Peter has been involved with helping drive a downturn of ivory consumption and demand in Asia and shark fin, and seeing people like that and the work that they've done over the years is inspiring. It's what he specializes in.
Our next question comes from Louise B. And this is to you, Damien. She asks, how are the new Akashinga doing in Mozambique now?
Thanks for that question. I tell you what's exciting about Mozambique is that I came from Australia and I came from the ocean. I think I've got salt water running through my veins, and the area in Mozambique that we have moved into as part of a long-term agreement in conjunction with the local communities and the local government. It's the largest former hunting block in the country. When you combine the coastal and maritime component, as well as the terrestrial, it's about 2.2 million acres. It links onto Genève National Park, and then heading further west will eventually create a corridor linking Zimbabwe with the Indian Ocean. The second group of rangers have just been deployed. Second group of rangers are all Akashinga, so the women of Akashinga. It's the first of its kind in Mozambique. And they're going out there already deploying and making arrests and stopping the poaching that's going on. One of the biggest problems we have there in this particular park in Mozambique is illegal logging. While it breaks my heart to see the carcass of a dead elephant, when you see a 1,000-year-old tree cut down, you can't replace a 1,000-year-old forest overnight. So they're already out there doing amazing work. And as we go further into coastal and maritime conservation as part of this, I'm extremely excited and I'm proud. I just saw one of the questions come up there in the chat. You know, what are we both proud of, Jane? And I'm going to throw it over to you after I get to answer. But I'm proud that I was courageous enough to make a decision in my life that I wanted to do something constructive with the skills and the funding that I had, and give up everything to try and do something that I thought could make a difference. Whether that made a difference in the beginning or not, it took a while to get to where we are now, but I'm proud I took the chance. I get asked all the time, how do you get involved with conservation? And what you said before, Jane, it's so true. You just roll up your sleeves and just get started. Trying to do good is infectious, and you just got to make a start. It's not going to come knocking on your door and find you. You have to go out and seek it. So Jane, if I could throw that question over to you, and sorry to interrupt Gwen with the flow of questions there, but it's something that I also want to ask Jane. What are you proud of?
Well, I think it's two things, Damien. And the first one would be starting Roots and Shoots, because of the huge difference it's making every day in so many parts of the world. And it's growing all the time. Like you just mentioned, introducing it in some of your programs. And this is what's happening. You know, we're partnering and it's spreading. And these young people, it's like a family. So I'm very proud of starting that, because it's my biggest hope. But the other thing is a bit different from anything we've been talking about. But when I was made to go to Cambridge after 2 years with the chimps, when I hadn't been to college, and I had to do a PhD because Leakey said I had to. And I was nervous, you can imagine. And the first thing I was told by so many of these erudite professors, that I'd done everything wrong. I shouldn't have given the chimps names. They should have had numbers. That was scientific. I couldn't talk about their personalities, their minds, or their emotions, because those were unique to humans. But luckily, I had a teacher when I was a child who taught me that in this respect, these erudite professors were talking rubbish. And that was my dog, Rusty. I mean, you can't share your life in a meaningful way with an animal and not know the professors were wrong.
Yeah.
And so because chimps, I mean, we share 98.6% of the composition of our DNA with them. And because they kiss, embrace, hold hands, maternal behavior, good or bad, like us, males competing for dominance, and social structures that are very, very complex, you know, all these things like humans, that opened the door for people to think, well, after all, there isn't this sharp line that I was told that humans were separate from the rest of the animal kingdom. And that was at Cambridge University in 1961. 1961.
Yeah.
So now it's accepted, and there's a flurry of investigation into animal intelligence and animal emotions. And I mean, I'm sure many of you listening saw My Octopus Teacher. And so we now know that the octopus is amazingly intelligent, and other people say the octopus can dream. And yeah, it's just amazing. So I'm proud of that. It was the chimps that did it, but I stuck to my guns.
Thank you, Jane. And our last question comes from Zeta F, and she asks to you, Jane, and to you, Damien, what can we as private citizens do in other parts of the world to prevent poaching and to protect nature?
I think get educated about the issue, read up what's going on, find an organization that is out there trying to work on the front lines of this problem, or whether it be in demand reduction, whether it be on policy, whether it be on the ground working with communities, whether it be organizations focused on social impact, trying to achieve a nature-based outcome. Find an organization and get behind it. Roll your sleeves up, get your hands dirty, get out there and do something. And if you can't do something, then like on the ground, then there's so many other ways that we can make changes in our lives that are gonna be a part of the positive change that we need on this planet. And we need this change, not just from a small group of individuals, or whether they be a select few billionaires or CEOs or conservationists. The responsibility is all of us, and the time is now.
Yes, well, I really don't have much to add to that. It's all the things that I thought, you must get involved with something. You must think about what you do in your own daily life, which everybody can do. Realize that you do make a difference every day. Choose what sort of difference you want to make. Join organizations. Join your organization, Damien. Join Roots and Shoots, JGI. Some people can write a check, a big check, that can make a huge difference. And these may be people who don't want to actually get involved with hands-on, dirty, muddy stuff. And we're very grateful to them. So, everybody can get involved. I think that's the answer.
I can say to people around the world that want to get involved, come and play. Come and get involved. Find a way to get your hands dirty. Find a way to make a difference, to make an impact, whether it's through Jane's organization or myself.
People can write too. They can write articles. They can write letters to their politicians, their local politicians. They can write books. Some of these can have a huge impact.
Jane, I know we're about to wrap up, and Gwen is going to close us out. Just a final. I just want to say thank you again. And I think I don't only just speak on behalf of the people that are on this call today, but I speak on behalf of a global community, on behalf of a generation, of a civilization, of the inspiration that you've brought and what you mean to so many people's lives. And not just the people that have a laptop or a phone, but the people that are swinging around on vines out there in the jungle, and the chimpanzees, and the people that have trunks, the people that have horns and tusks. They're all in this together with us. As you said, we are not apart from nature. We are a part of nature. And thank you for just radiating that message of positive hope for all of us at a time when it has never been more critical. And thank you, Jane. Lots of love.
And thank you, Damien, and lots of love to you. And thanks to everybody who supported you and your work, and who supported me too.
Yeah. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you so much, Jane and Damien, for sharing all of your insights with us today on the current successes in conservation and how you inspire action. We're so grateful to everyone joining us here today. To learn more and to continue supporting our critical mission, please visit www.iapf.org and follow us on social media. This concludes today's virtual event. Thank you all.